Most women believe that what makes a man remember them is what they gave: love, loyalty, sacrifice. But memory is rarely born from what is freely handed over. A man does not carry her in his soul because she poured herself endlessly into him. He remembers her because she touched something within him that no other could reach, and once awakened, it cannot be forgotten. That is the one thing, the psychological imprint, the mark left upon his inner world, far deeper than affection or beauty alone. Imagine this. A woman sits across from him in silence, her eyes steady, her presence unwavering. She does not plead, does not bend, does not trade herself for scraps of his attention. And yet, he feels unsettled, almost haunted, as though she holds a mirror that reveals parts of him he would rather avoid. This is not seduction in the usual sense. It is an encounter with the self, the part of him that knows when he is in the presence of something authentic and unyielding. He may leave her life, but he cannot leave her behind, because the psyche does not allow one to forget the figure who forces the soul to awaken. Carl Jung spoke of the anima, the feminine figure within the male unconscious that guides him toward wholeness. When a woman embodies not merely her surface charm but the archetypal depth of the feminine, she becomes more than herself in his perception. She is no longer just her. She is the gateway to something vast, symbolic, and eternal. And once a man experiences that, his unconscious brands her image into his memory. He may resist her, deny her, or even reject her, but she remains like a ghost that is not frightening but formative. A voice that calls even when he tries to cover his ears. This is why the most unforgettable women are not always the most beautiful or the most accommodating. They are the ones who dared to embody themselves fully, without shrinking. They do not dilute their essence to be palatable. Instead, they show a man what power looks like when it is not loud, but calm when it is not. Demanding, but immovable. The world teaches women to soften their edges, to keep his love. Paradoxically, it is the sharpness of those edges that carves her memory into his being. But let us speak plainly. Men are not haunted by women who bend to easily. They are haunted by the woman who could walk away without flinching, who revealed to him without saying a word that she does not need him to exist in her fullness. This realization ignites both admiration and fear. On one hand, he longs for her strength, because it reflects the very strength he lacks. On the other, he fears her, because her presence forces him to confront his inadequacy. And the psyche does not forget such encounters. The soul records them like scars, permanent and unyielding. Think of it this way. Every man's unconscious is like a library filled with shadows, stories, and symbols. Some women pass through as mere pages, pleasant, forgettable, gone once the book closes. But some become entire chapters, written in ink so deep it bleeds through the rest of the story. These are the women who understood that their power was not in chasing or proving, but in living so fully aligned with themselves that his unconscious could not help but bind her to his inner myth. She becomes not just part of his history, but part of his psychology. The Stoics said that the most powerful influence comes not from controlling others, but from mastering oneself. A woman who does this, who is disciplined in her self-respect, deliberate in her silence, discerning in her giving, cannot be erased from a man's mind. He may forget the dinners, the arguments, the words spoken in passing, but he will not forget how he felt in her presence. He will not forget that peculiar mixture of longing and intimidation, desire and humility, awe and discomfort. These are the impressions that carve themselves into the unconscious, like etchings on stone. And here lies the paradox. The one thing you can do to make a man never forget you is not to do more, but less. It is to resist the urge to prove your worth, and instead stand as though it were undeniable. It is to understand that memory is not built on sacrifice, but on significance. When you embody your worth as a fact rather than a plea, you bypass the realm of fleeting memory and enter the realm of archetype. You cease to be just another woman, and you become the woman capitalized, eternal, unforgettable. So, if you wonder why some women live in the minds of men long after their names are no longer spoken, it is because they awakened something symbolic within him. They became a figure he could not simply replace, because to replace her would mean to replace his own unconscious journey, and that, psychologically, is impossible. She is no longer just herself. She is the mark of the eternal feminine written upon his soul. There is a reason why certain faces return to a man's dreams. Years after the relationship has ended, long after the details of her laughter or the rhythm of her voice have faded, he remembers not the specifics of her daily gestures, but the weight she carried, the presence that altered the atmosphere of every room she entered. Presence is not an act, not something rehearsed. It is the alignment of one's inner life with one's outer expression. When a woman has done her shadow work, when she has walked through the fire of her own insecurities and survived, she emanates a steadiness that is impossible to erase. This is the essence of psychological permanence. She lingers because she embodied truth, and truth is unforgettable. Think of the countless women who tried to hold him by pleasing, accommodating, or competing for his attention. Their efforts may gain them temporary affection, but rarely permanence. The unconscious does not bow to convenience. It obeys to archetype. An archetype favors depth over performance, silence over noise, substance over show. The man who meets such a woman may not always choose her, but he cannot unsee her. Like a mountain once glimpsed in the distance, she becomes part of his inner landscape. No matter how far he travels away from her, what creates this indelible impression is not manipulation, nor is it accident. It is the union of authenticity and mystery. Authenticity grounds her. She does not feign innocence or fabricate allure. She allows her complexity to breathe, revealing both strength and vulnerability without apology. Mystery preserves her. She does not unfold her entire being at once, does not collapse into him as if his approval were oxygen. She remains slightly beyond reach, not because she withholds affection, but because she belongs to herself first. And nothing haunts a man's psyche more than the realization that he cannot fully possess what he deeply desires. Jung understood that the unconscious clings to unresolved figures. A woman who does not collapse into his expectations, but remains sovereign, creates a psychic tension he cannot resolve. He wants to define her, but she slips through definitions. He wants to predict her, but she surprises him. He wants to own her, but she belongs to herself. That tension, the desire to complete what cannot be completed, is precisely what chains her image to his memory. She becomes a riddle his unconscious cannot stop turning over, a question without a final answer. There is a symbolic cruelty to this, though not in malice. She does not set out to wound him, but her very existence confronts him with his incompleteness. Every man longs to be whole, to unite with the feminine principle within himself. The woman who embodies depth awakens this longing, but because he has not yet integrated it, he projects it onto her. She becomes his missing half, his unfinished poem. Even if he walks away, he feels that something unfinished walks with him, like a shadow at dusk. This is why he cannot forget her. She is not just her body. not just her words. She is his unclaimed soul walking outside of him. Modern psychology tells us that memory is tied most powerfully to emotion, not logic. What burns into the psyche is what makes us feel profoundly alive, whether in joy, pain, awe, or fear. A woman who embodies herself fully provokes all of these at once. She can make him feel alive in the ecstasy of desire, unsettled in the face of her independence, humbled by her refusal to shrink, and even ashamed of the parts of himself that fall short in comparison. This complexity of emotions makes forgetting impossible. He may attempt to bury her image beneath new faces, but she will surface again in quiet moments, unbidden. The Stoics would say that one should not fear being forgotten, but instead focus on living in accordance with nature and virtue. A woman aligned with this truth does not strategize about memory. She simply becomes unforgettable by being unshakably herself. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that external validation was fleeting, but inner mastery was eternal. So too, the unforgettable woman does not chase after permanence in his mind. Ironically, it is her refusal to grasp at his memory that ensures she will live there forever. And here is where the paradox deepens. The unforgettable woman is not memorable because she clung tightly to him, but because she was willing to let him go without diminishing herself. Her detachment was not coldness, but a profound declaration: I do not need you to validate my existence. That kind of freedom terrifies and fascinates a man simultaneously. For men are not conditioned to forget women who walked away with dignity, nor can they erase the echo of her silence once it revealed her strength. In the end, the one thing that makes her unforgettable is not beauty, not sacrifice, not devotion. It is the fearless act of embodying her wholeness, even if it means losing him. And in losing her, he discovers he has lost something much greater: his chance to escape himself. That realization, subtle yet crushing, is why he will never forget her. Not today, not years from now, not even in the arms of another. There comes a moment in every man's life when he encounters a woman who refuses to play the role assigned to her by society, by culture, or even by his unconscious desires. Most women, without realizing it, step into archetypal scripts handed down for generations: the nurturer, the caretaker, the one who sacrifices. And while these roles may offer comfort, they rarely carve permanence into his psyche. But the woman, who embodies herself as a sovereign figure, untamed by these expectations, becomes unforgettable because she is not only a woman to him, she is the embodiment of his own unfulfilled longing for freedom. Imagine him meeting her. At first, she appears like any other, warm, approachable, perhaps even kind. But slowly he realizes she does not orbit around his needs. She has her own center of gravity, her own sacred fire that does not dim to flatter him. He cannot pull her entirely into his orbit, and that lack of control unsettles him more than he admits. For men are rarely haunted by what they can fully possess, they are haunted by what resists possession. She becomes the figure of his unfinished individuation, the anima that demands integration but refuses. Subjugation. Jung often wrote that the unconscious repeats what it cannot resolve. This is why a man may forget the woman who bent easily, but he cannot forget the one who stood as a question to his soul. She appears in his thoughts not as nostalgia, but as an unresolved myth. He remembers the way she carried herself, the way her silence spoke louder than words, the way her boundaries revealed her worth without her having to declare it. It was as though she represented a hidden law of nature, that no one owns what is whole in itself. This realization is too vast to discard, so she remains imprinted, returning again and again in memory. Consider how memory is built. It does not cling to repetition, to the ordinary patterns of daily exchange. Memory clings to disruption, to moments that fracture the expected order. A woman who refuses to collapse into his world creates such a disruption. She alters the narrative. Instead of being a character in his story, she becomes the story itself, chapter he cannot finish, a theme that threads through every later relationship. He may not speak of her, but she lives as a quiet watermark across the pages of his life. There is power in restraint, a truth that ancient philosophers understood. Seneca warned that attachment makes slaves of us, that our worth should not be dependent on the chains of another's approval. The unforgettable woman lives by this principle, often unconsciously. She does not drown him with constant access, nor does she seek to soothe his every insecurity. Her love, when given, is potent, because it is never born of desperation. And when she withholds, it is not to punish, but to protect her own sovereignty. This balance between openness and restraint creates the haunting rhythm that echoes in his memory. He will remember the night. She did not beg him to stay, but instead let him go with calm eyes. He will remember the silence that followed, a silence that spoke of her unbroken spirit. He will remember the way she walked away without turning back, as though she carried a secret world within her that was never truly his. That image alone is enough to brand her into his unconscious. For men are not wired to forget the figure who exposes their dependence, who shows them that love is not something they can command, but something they must be worthy of. Modern trauma. Psychology teaches us that the deepest imprints are left not by consistency, but by rupture, the moments where the emotional current was so strong it carved a canyon into the mind. The unforgettable woman does not aim to wound, but her refusal to collapse becomes a rupture in his pattern. He expected compliance, but met resistance. He expected neediness, but met independence. He expected her to fold, but she unfolded instantly, uncontainable, undeniable. This rupture becomes a scar, and scars are memories the soul refuses to erase. And here lies the paradox once more. She does not do this one thing consciously for him. She does it for herself. She embodies her own wholeness, and in doing so, she becomes unforgettable by accident. Her refusal to be forgotten is not strategy, it is the inevitable consequence of living in full alignment with her worth. The man may wander, chase novelty, or even deny what he felt in her presence. But the psyche has its own laws, and those laws are unforgiving. The truth cannot be erased, only repressed, and repression always finds its way back to the surface. So, he carries her image, whether he admits it or not. Sometimes it will appear in longing, sometimes in regret, sometimes in the haunting question of what if. But always it remains. Because she was not merely a woman to him, she was the mirror of something eternal, something his soul craves but cannot fully name. And that, more than beauty, more than loyalty, more than sacrifice, is why she is unforgettable. The unforgettable woman is rarely the one who tried hardest to make herself unforgettable. That irony cuts deep, for many spend years rehearsing charm, curating appearances, or overgiving their love in hopes of being remembered. But what men cannot forget is not a performance, it is the shock of authenticity, the rawness of someone who stood before him with nothing to prove and nothing to hide. She was not desperate to be etched into his memory, and that very indifference is what seared her there permanently. Memory, in this sense, is cruelly impartial. It does not preserve those who try to secure it. It preserves those who shook the foundations of expectation. A woman who clings, pleads, and reshapes herself for him blends into the sea of countless others who did the same. But a woman who embodies herself fully even when it costs her his approval becomes unforgettable because she represents an exception, a break in the pattern. And the human psyche remembers fractures, not repetitions. It remembers the ones who disrupted the script, not the ones who followed it. Think of the myth of Psyche and Eros, where the feminine figure must pass impossible trials before she can unite with love itself. The unforgettable woman is like Psyche, but inverted. She does not pass trials to win him. She becomes the trial for him. To stand in her presence is to feel the weight of initiation. She does not bend to his demands. She demands his soul awaken. To meet her, and whether he rises to that challenge or flees from it, the initiation itself becomes unforgettable. For one cannot encounter the sacred and return unchanged. He remembers her not just in images, but in sensations. The way his chest tightened when she challenged him without raising her voice. The way time seemed slower in her silence, as if she carried eternity within her. The way her eyes looked at him not as a savior, but as an equal who must prove his own worth. These sensations burrow into him, far deeper than the details of her smile or the shape of her body. Flesh can be forgotten, the soul cannot. And what she awakened in him was not flesh, but soul. Jung wrote of individuation as the process of becoming whole, of integrating what is hidden in the unconscious into the light of awareness. A woman aligned with her inner wholeness embodies this process, and when a man encounters it, he feels both awe and terror. Awe, because she reflects the completeness he longs for. Terror, because she reveals the incompleteness he has avoided. And awe mixed with terror, that is the alchemy of unforgettable memory. For who forgets the moment they glimpsed both heaven and abyss in the same pair of eyes? This is why her silence after he leaves feels louder than her presence ever did. It is not just the absence of her voice, but the absence of the mirror she once held to his soul. Without her, he no longer sees himself reflected in archetypal light, and though he may fill the silence with noise, new women, new pursuit, carry the same symbolic weight. For memory is not loyal to novelty. It is loyal to what felt eternal. And she, by being fully herself, embodied eternity for him in a way no one else had. Consider also the nature of human desire. It does not cling to abundance, it clings to scarcity. The more freely something is given, the easier it is discarded. The more it resists, the more it is pursued in memory. The unforgettable woman was never an endless well of validation. She gave when it was real, not when it was demanded. She opened when it was earned, not when it was convenient. And this scarcity, this refusal to dilute herself, becomes a wound in him, a hunger that no substitute can ever fully satisfy. The Stoics remind us that true freedom lies in detachment. A woman who lives by this truth, whether consciously or instinctively, becomes unforgettable because she never chained her value to his recognition. She stood whole, whether he saw her or not. And this, paradoxically, is what forces him to keep seeing her even after she is gone. For men do not remember what depended on them. They remember what did not. They remember what stood apart, untouchable, radiant in its independence. And here lies the deepest secret. She does not remain unforgettable because she tethered herself to his memory. She remains unforgettable because she cut the tether entirely. She walked away with her wholeness intact, and the image of her walking away became the very brand burned into his soul. That brand is not pain, nor bitterness, it is initiation. He met, for a moment, the eternal feminine in its full sovereignty. And no man forgets such an encounter, not in a lifetime, not even in dreams. If you strip away all illusions, you will find that what a man remembers most is not what she said, not even what she did, but how he felt in her presence. Feelings are the ink of memory. They write themselves into the soul where reason cannot erase them. The unforgettable woman ignites feelings that reach beyond the surface. She is not a fleeting spark, but a fire that warms and burns at once. She is the paradox of comfort and challenge, tenderness and steel, love and distance and paradox. Once tasted, never leaves the tongue of memory. Why is this paradox so unforgettable? Because the psyche craves wholeness, and wholeness is contradiction. Reconciled. Most women give him comfort without challenge, or challenge without comfort. Few embody both, but she does. She can hold him with a gaze that says, "I see you," and in the same breath withdraw with a silence that whispers, "But I will not lose myself to keep you." This duality unsettles him, for it awakens the archetype of the anima, the mysterious, elusive guide of his own unconscious. She is no longer merely herself. She has become a symbol, and symbols are eternal. Every man carries in his unconscious an image of the feminine, shaped by myth, culture, and shadow. Most women reflect fragments of this image, but the unforgettable woman touches its core. She stirs in him not only desire, but destiny. He senses, even if dimly, that she is not just another chapter in his story. She is the turning point, the threshold he must cross to become more than he is. Whether he crosses it or not is irrelevant. The threshold itself remains haunting him, calling to him in dreams, whispering in the silence of other women's arms. This is why she does not fade, even when time and distance suggest she should. For her image is not preserved in the fragile vault of conscious thought, where details decay and memory blurs. Her image is preserved in the unconscious, the timeless reservoir where archetypes live, and what is stored there is immune to forgetting. He may move forward, he may fall in love again, he may even swear she no longer matters, but when the right trigger comes, her presence rises unbidden, proof that she was never gone. The psyche does not release what is archetypal. Think of how he remembers her absence more vividly than her presence. He may forget the nights they laughed together, but he will never forget the moment she chose to walk away without begging him to follow. That moment revealed a truth, that she existed beyond him, that she would not collapse to keep him, that she was whole with or without him. And men do not forget the woman who proves she does not need them, for in that proof lies both his greatest wound and his greatest fascination. The ancients knew this. The Stoics warned that the one who is most feared is not the tyrant with power over others, but the one who cannot be enslaved by desire. When she becomes this figure not out of spite, but out of wholeness, she commands his memory forever. He cannot erase the taste of freedom she carried. He cannot unsee the way she looked at him as though she loved him deeply yet could live fully without him. That kind of strength both humbles and obsesses, for it awakens his own lack of sovereignty, and the soul remembers forever those who awaken it. What makes this unforgettable quality so rare is that it cannot be faked. Pretending detachment, rehearsing mystery, performing independence, these crumble under time and pressure. True, unforgettable presence is born from inner work, from the woman who has faced her shadows and reclaimed her worth. She has walked through abandonment without begging, through loneliness without breaking, through rejection without collapsing. Such a woman does not need to act strong. She is strong, and strength of that nature imprints itself like a seal upon the unconscious of anyone who encounters it. So, what is the one thing she does that ensures he never forgets her? She embodies herself fully, without apology, without disguise, without fear of loss. She does not give herself away cheaply, nor does she guard herself in bitterness. She is open, but not desperate, loving, but not consumed, whole, yet willing to share. And when she leaves, or when he loses her, the absence feels like losing not just a person, but a universe. That is unforgettable. That is psychologically impossible to erase. For he may forget the details of her voice, the curve of her face, the rhythm of her step, but he will never forget what she forced him to feel, the confrontation with truth, the ache of incompleteness, the glimpse of eternity. And no man forgets eternity, not when it looked him in the eyes and walked away unshaken. What remains after she is gone is not her body, not her voice, but the echo she leaves in his inner world. It is as though her presence carved out a space inside of him that cannot be filled by anyone else. He may try to substitute, to replace, to bury her under new affections, but the hollow remains, reminding him of what he once touched but could not hold. This hollow is not weakness, it is initiation. It teaches him, even if painfully, that not all things are his to possess, and that the feminine in its true form belongs to itself first. The unforgettable woman does not become eternal in his mind because she fought for the place. She becomes eternal because she never tried to claim it. She is not unforgettable because she begged to be remembered. She is unforgettable because she lived in such alignment with her truth that forgetting her is impossible. Her worth was never a negotiation, never a performance, never a desperate reaching. It was an unspoken fact, a radiant quality woven into every gesture, every silence, every boundary she held without needing to justify it. He may not have had the words for it then, but he knew she was not like the others. This is the paradox of memory. The harder one tries to secure it, the faster it slips away. A man remembers not the woman who gave endlessly without restraint, but the one who gave with discernment, who knew her love was valuable enough to be measured. He does not remember the woman who was always available at the cost of herself, but the one who sometimes withdrew into her own world, reminding him that she was never fully his. That subtle distance, the quiet assertion of independence, becomes the very thing that lingers in his unconscious. For the psyche clings to tension, not ease, and she was the tension he could never resolve. Jung understood that archetypes do not disappear, they recur. They resurface in dreams, in projections, in the silent pull of desire. And so she resurfaces in him not as she truly is, but as the figure his unconscious fashioned from her essence. The woman who embodied the anima, the woman who revealed his incompleteness, the woman who stood sovereign when he expected surrender. She may be gone, but the image remains, recurring like a sacred symbol. He may deny her, curse her, even resent her, but he cannot erase her. She is crossed from personal memory into myth, and myth is not forgotten. Even years later, when he sees another woman laugh in a way faintly reminiscent of her, or when he hears a song she once loved, the old ache stirs. It is not nostalgia for her as an individual. It is nostalgia for the way she made him feel alive, challenged, and undone. No substitute can replicate that combination, because no substitute carries her wholeness. And that is what lingers her wholeness. He remembers that he could not fracture her, that she walked away intact, and that truth haunts him, because it reflects back his own incompleteness. The Stoics taught that power belongs to those who cannot be shaken by loss. And so her power remains in memory because she was unshaken. He may have expected her to collapse, but she did not. He may have expected her to plead, but she stayed silent. He may have expected her to diminish herself, but she only stood taller. And the man who witnesses such defiance of expectation carries it with him for life. For in that moment, she revealed that she needed nothing from him to remain whole. And needing nothing is the most powerful thing a person can embody. So, what is the closing truth of this mystery? That she is unforgettable, not because she sought to be remembered, but because she lived in such a way that forgetting her became psychologically impossible. She aligned herself so fully with her own worth that even his unconscious bowed to it. She became a mirror, a threshold, a symbol, a myth. She became the paradox of closeness and distance, of love and detachment, of vulnerability and sovereignty. And those paradoxes cannot be erased, for they belong not to the fleeting world of preference, but to the eternal world of archetype. And so, she lives within him still, not as an image alone, but as a haunting, a guide, a wound, and a reminder. He may never name it, but he feels it. She was not simply a woman he knew. She was the embodiment of something timeless, and the soul does not forget the timeless. It carries it, always, until the end. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.